Welcome to the Arts Our Education Talk It Up podcast, where we talk to national, state, and local leaders who are working to make arts education part of every student's life. I'm Jim Palmarini, your host. Arts Our Education is sponsored by the National Coalition for Core Arts Standards. NCAS is a collaboration of 8 national arts and arts education organizations who actively work to ensure that quality arts-based education opportunities are available for every student. And I am so jazzed about today's podcast. We are talking media arts on Talk It Up. How ironic. This is media arts after all. This podcast was inspired by the ongoing work of NCAS's Media Arts Committee that was formed as part of the working group that created the 2014 National Standards in the Arts. It was a pretty bold move to create K-12 standards, grade by grade, in media arts, but I think we can all agree it was the right choice. Since that time, the Media Arts Committee has worked tirelessly to build understanding and buy-in for these standards and the associated curriculum. I'm going to stop my share to build teaching and, most importantly, student opportunities in this exciting 21st century arts learning pathway. So today, we're going to talk to 3 individuals who've been deeply invested in media arts in multiple capacities as advocates, learners, students, artists, and teachers. So with me today in sequence are Gayle Nichollali, Media Arts and CTE Visual Arts Instructor at La Canada Unified School Districts and Adjunct Professor at Pacific Oaks College in Pasadena, California. Welcome, Gayle.
Thank you.
So glad you are here. Dain Olsen, Media and Visual Arts Specialist, Instructor and Administrator at Los Angeles Unified School District. Hello, Dain.
Hi.
Glad you are
Dain,
here.
yeah, that's right. You got it.
And Julissa Aguilar, film student and marketing correspondent at Lycoming College in Pennsylvania. So with that, let's get started with a pretty fundamental question. And rather than say, what's the definition of media arts? Could you each give me an example for you that exemplifies media arts at its best? So I'll just start out with Dain. Let's hear from you.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate being here. The example that for me that comes to mind as kind of a peak experience was in a media arts class. It was a graphic design class, and we suddenly had the opportunity to work with Epic Games and another organization in LAUSD and use Epic Games software, which is used for creating virtual environments, very highly realistic virtual environments that are pretty accessible, easy to use tools for students. And to use those towards, in some way, revisioning or reimagining Los Angeles 2030. And so it was a great opportunity for them to use these tools and kind of explore a virtual world and how to construct virtual worlds in 3D design software. And as well as do some project-based learning, really, that got them to interface with their local community. And so the point of the exercise was, again, to revision Los Angeles. How would you improve Los Angeles? And using these tools and UNICEF global standards in terms of the future, sustainability, that sort of thing. And so they learned a lot in it, and we did a lot of great work, and they had a really great time. It was like I kind of lost them because the software was just so riveting for them that it was hard to get them to pay any attention to me and like learn some of the basic concepts that we're working on here. because once they're in there, they're just like really immersed in the software, in the virtual world, and constructing it, manipulating objects, changing surfaces, sort of creating architecture, basically, is what they're doing. And so what we were doing was we went into Google, we searched the local neighborhoods and captured images of areas that were dilapidated, that were really awful in terms of just walking through them or being in them. And I said, capture that area and see if you can revise it using this software, because what we're going to do is merge that photograph of that situation and then merge it with their virtual world that they created. Because you can actually, in this software, you can capture that structural neighborhood, bring it into the software, and you can actually redecorate the buildings that are there. It's very hard to explain exactly, but at any rate, they looked at their neighborhoods, studying them, and were studying design principles with the LA Planning Department. And so they were guiding us in terms of design revision for Los Angeles and how do you make neighborhoods livable and sustainable and so forth.
Sounds like a great empowerment moment.
Yeah. And so they had a great time. They did a lot of great work. And it was amazing to see them sort of lighten up as they realized the power that they had to reimagine their world, revision their world, and change it in some way, transform the environment around them to something more idyllic. And we were prepared to present that to LA Planning Department, and they were going to review it. But unfortunately, the pandemic hit at that point. So that was kind of the disappointing end of the project. But it really exemplifies, I think, the power of media arts and what students can do with it.
Thanks, Dain. Gayle, let's hear from you. What's your example?
Well, my story of what exemplifies media arts is going to be on the tail end of Dain's, which is because of the pandemic, my students were able to do something I couldn't even imagine, using just the tools that they had in their hand, which was their cell phones. I devised a lesson plan during the pandemic where they could do virtual photo shoots. And so it was something that I wanted to make sure that they could problem solve, because I always think of media arts as an activity or some thing that they have to solve a problem, real world problem in a different way. Because we've got one of the advantages of having technology to guide certain decisions that we can make. So I created a lesson plan for my students to do these virtual photo shoots. And after lots of research, figured it out, talked to somebody in Germany about how she did it, and kind of got an idea. So my students did these wonderful photo shoots where they could connect with each other via their phones, via FaceTime, and it turned out really great. So I would say that that would be something to really make sure that our students during times of a pandemic or any kind of world catastrophe or something, like, that they could communicate and they could use these tools to do that.
And connect.
And very much connect.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And heartening, given the disconnect that it happened so intensely during the pandemic and continues to happen. So Julissa, what can you tell us about what do you think so great about media arts?
So actually in high school, I used to do photography, to do sports and street photography. And so since I'm from a low income community, that really let me, I guess, capture the people that I was living in, the community, my environment. And I fell in love with doing that. And that was through photography and a little bit of videography. So when I came to college, I brought that, I kind of utilized it to tell my community story in a different part of the country. And so I went from Los Angeles to Pennsylvania and some people couldn't believe that I lived right by Skid Row, or that every day I passed by and there was always something going on in downtown Los Angeles. And so I feel like media arts, specifically photography and video, for really allowed me to capture stories and moments and community and tell their stories and visibilize that for other people who may not experience that.
That is so amazing. The opportunity you had to bring a completely different perspective to a different part of the country. And, right now, we are in such a challenging time of polarization, and I would see that as an opportunity to maybe communicate in a way that can maybe remedy some of that polarization. So that's really, I love that. All right, so hey, Dain, what about this National Media Arts Education Initiative that you've been working on? Let me just say this, Dain has been a leader in this movement. He is the man in so many ways. So let's hear about it, Dain. Tell us about the initiative.
Well, media arts is not new. Media arts education is not new. It's been around for decades. It's been under visual arts primarily because it wasn't considered separate on its own until recently, really. It is in other subject areas as well. So theater does some types of film, and dance will use video, and music, of course, uses technology. What we're talking about here is that media arts has grown in sophistication in recent decades. So it's become quite amazing in its power and its potential for the tools that it has and the accessibility it has, this proliferation of platforms, social media platforms, etc. So it's all around us, right? So that really brought it to the fore in terms of arts education. I think it was first proposed in around 2000 in California to consider media arts. And so it's been considered kind of on the back burner. And I think when NCAS realized at a certain point that, yeah, it was distinct, it was separate, it has qualities that are different from the other arts disciplines. They made that bold move, as you say, and endorsed it, and so supported it in separation. That was really the first step. And so the standards have been used now for about 10 years, I think, or almost. And so I think it's really shown and demonstrated that it is a standalone separate discipline. Other arts disciplines, you don't want to funnel media arts through the other arts disciplines. It's got such potential that it needs to stand on its own and be fully developed for what it can do, which we're beginning to describe here in this conversation. This initiative really completes that. Then we have the standards. In California, we have a framework. It's part of that framework. And we have course codes in California that are specific to media arts. What we don't have is a credential. We don't have the inclusion in educational code in California. So there's a couple of smaller things there that need to be included, and then we can step into being fully established and developing the discipline, and therefore hiring and training media arts teachers specifically, which right now you cannot hire specifically a media arts teacher that's been trained in a higher education institution. So that's what the initiative is about informing the whole community, getting them to feel that they're a collective, the existing media arts teachers to be aware of what media arts education is and this story that's been happening, and then the potential for the discipline if we can really establish it everywhere and develop it for what it can be.
So that's a great lead into the question I want to ask you, Gayle, which is, assuming, let's say we have a certified media arts educator, what does that K-12 media arts curriculum look like? What would you imagine that it might include? Some sense of,
I might imagine it would include everything from understanding what the visual language is beyond art itself, but what the media language is. how to decipher the media, even at a young age. I was telling my class today, as they were staring into their phones, waiting for the bell to ring, that they are actually being controlled by a media that they can actually create. And that this is an important thing that they have to understand, that that thing that they're holding in their hand is really like, it's this thing that I am trying to teach them how to use to spread their own individual messages to send out into the world. And I think that that's kind of where it starts with visual media literacy, even in kindergarten, because these children, they grow up with a phone in their hands. And I kind of want to make sure that we are communicating like we would any other subject, its origins, its influences on their lives and on the community. So I think that would be really important, something that I always want to talk about with my students, not just the tools, but how the tools can be an instrument for social change, an influence on other people, a builder or breakdown of communities. And I think that it's really important that becomes part of what our, because the tools will always change, but the human beings will always be here needing some type of communication or needing to spread their message in whatever way that they need to. And I want to make sure that our children can do that.
I love what you had said about kindergarten, that it starts at a very young age, and these are digital natives. So,
and they're consumers. They're
and
consumers.
they're consumers. Yeah.
And I want to make sure that their consumption. I was just talking to my students today about TikTok, about the consumption of TikTok and the influence that it has on their brain. And that every time their phone dings, it distracts them. It's a minute to stop listening to me or their parents or whomever and stop communicating. And so I was trying to explain that to them. So now how do you control that, right? How do you become the control for that? And so I think it goes both ways in terms of teaching our students the ins and outs and ups and downs and the belly of the beast called media arts. I really think that's what we need to do.
So, Julissa, this is a perfect end for you as the student who has been so deeply engaged in media arts and now in your higher education experience. What's that been like for you as a student to be so deeply engaged as you are in film and video and media arts in general?
Can you clarify a little bit more? So do you want me to talk about like what I actually do in the different positions? Do you want me to talk about how I've benefited from those?
Why don't you talk about what you're actually doing, and we'll get to the benefits a little bit later.
Okay. So when I started here, I was in a position to work at the stockroom for the film and video arts department. And the stockroom is where we have all of our camera equipment, our video. And then, so through that, I got to meet a bunch of awesome seniors, and I learned from them and I built from them. And so the connections that I made eventually led me to become a teacher's assistant for other film, even other departments like sociology. I did help a sociology class that was focused on race and ethnicity to produce a documentary of the community around them and how they reacted to that. And from there, I went to working as a marketing production coordinator. So right now I work with the college campus that reflects students' needs and the way that we operate the community. Aside from that, though, really, I've gone on to have my own personal business. So I'll do senior photos. I've done wedding photography, and I also do like commercial advertisement with independent film crews. So really, thankfully for media arts, I've had a lot of exposure to different people, experiences, histories, and I hope that one day I get to do what I want to do, which is create documentary films on underrepresented communities and vocalize them and visibilize them to different parts of the world.
Let me ask you another follow-up question, Julissa, that sort of backs up a little bit, because I'm so impressed with what you're doing now. But I guess the question is how you got there. Let's just back up to your days with Mr. Olsen as a teacher. And what was the inspiration for you to, you know, to actually pick up a camera even?
So in middle school, I actually really wanted to be a video game designer. I wanted to do like 3D animation. I wanted to do Maya, but my high school didn't offer that. So the next best thing was video and photo, and I got to do that with Mr. Olsen. And so for my senior year, we produced a group project, and our work got into a statewide film festival, and luckily we were tied for third place. And so I realized like, hey, I kind of have a knack for this. So and I ended up deciding which college I wanted to go to. I went for their film program, and ever since then it's just kind of snowballed from there, from one opportunity to another. And I've been able to teach others about what I love, and I've had a great time.
I think it's really wonderful that you have taken on also the teaching of others. So you're sharing your knowledge, and that's just wonderful. So here's another question for all of you. In a way, Julissa, you addressed this. What are some of the ways in media arts education can prepare students, you know, to enter the 21st century workforce, which is, it's fast moving, it's complicated, it's different. And what does it take to, what does media arts do for a 21st century citizen, and, in a global society, I guess is the question. So, Dain, back to you.
Sure. Media arts is so 21st century. It's just, it's making the 21st century. So it is the pathway to preparation, even if you're not going to be a media artist. You're meeting people through social media, you're posting social media, that is media arts production. And so it really comes in handy, in the most practical way, but also media arts can set up situations that are very complex. And so what Julissa is doing and what she did in high school are project-based really ventures that are project management episodes. So you'll have an assignment to do a news story. You'll have to go interview somebody. You'll have to plan for that. You'll have to research it. You'll have to find out about it. You'll have to pre-visualize the whole process. And another example might be like Yearbook, which I've teach and has a journalistic aspect. It's very much a huge project for the students that goes through the whole year. You're setting up themes, you're figuring out your graphic designs for those themes, you're seeing what's happening all over the campus, you're scheduling things, there's logistics, there is just time management, collaboration, teamwork, scheduling, meeting deadlines, technical difficulties, technological organization, working in spreadsheets. It's mind-boggling. And so these projects, game design is another example. Anything where you're taking on that kind of a project, it is project management, a great deal of it. And so the art is interspersed throughout there, the creativity and so forth. in terms of how you think about things, problem solve, etc. That's why it's very comprehensive in the skill sets that it endows students with, and their confidence in meeting problems and dealing with problems and overcoming them, really, and achieving a goal that's rewarding and that you can share with others. And it's not just for the teacher, it doesn't just go into a file, it's something you share. I mean, my kids take pictures of their work and they spread it online. So it's all of the 21st century in one package.
All of those things at the same time, those
Mm-hmm.
4 C's of critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and let's see, what's the fourth one? I've forgotten.
Critical thinking.
Communication, collaboration,
Mm-hmm.
and a prize to someone who thinks of the fourth one. In the meantime, Gayle, what are your thoughts about 21st century skills?
I have so many students. I've been teaching now 15 years, and I have students who graduated who communicate with me. Actually, last year I did, during the pandemic, I did an alumni series where I kind of put out there on social media, hey, if you were my student, what are you doing now? And so many students came back to me to tell me how their media arts program in high school, whether it was photography or graphic design or a yearbook, helped them get to wherever they are today. And they were happy to talk to my students, my current students, and tell them how important the class was that they're taking, how important it is to understand how to make an appointment, how to keep an appointment, what questions to ask on an interview, even if that interview is where you're trying to get the job, because they learned that during class time. They learned that with how to communicate with each other, how to problem solve. So it is definitely a 21st century donut. It's got everything, including the whole. And so I think it's important that we communicate that to our students. I have 2 students, actually I have lots of students that have taken one part of whatever I taught them in photography or graphic design or yearbook, or even coding, because I also do Girls Who Code and the coding classes at some point. And they've told me, like, one student is a cartographer, like they work with maps, and they got the job because they knew how. They were the only in the interview. They were the only person who knew how to use a digital SLR.
Wow.
So I mean, like, wow. I have another student who just launched her own line of, because she was a biology major, and she launched her own line of cosmetics, and she's taking all of the photos herself because she can't. She can tell the lighting person what to do. I have another student who just quit her job right before the pandemic at the LA Times in marketing, and she's got her entire business, a flower business, where she's doing her own marketing because she knows how to use video production, how to use Adobe software, how to use photography in order to get what she wants. And she told me in an interview that we had, I'm still using the camera I had in your class 15 years ago. And she was telling the students, it's not about the tools. It's really about your skills to be able to problem solve and to carry your own weight and to know and to do what you know how to do. And you've learned it in high school. You can only get better. So these are the tools. My son he's one of the, I can't remember his full title, but he's a photographer for the Lakers. He learned that in high school. So and he took those skills from high school to college, and being able to do a gig as opposed to a job, being able to manage as an entrepreneur. These are all skills that we teach our students. Whether they fly with those or not is really up to them, but we do give them all these skills.
all these real world skills. So,
Oh,
Julissa,
absolutely.
as a marketing correspondent that you are, so you would seem to be walking, talking 21st century skill person. And what do you want to add to that?
Well, actually, kind of what Mr. Olsen was talking about earlier in terms of how it can prepare students. So, teamwork, especially, I've definitely learned how to effectively communicate with a team. So, teamwork and communication would have to be my two main points, especially since you need to be willing to hear each other's ideas out, but also like capable of expressing ideas too, so people can understand what you're trying to get across. But once you understand how to do communication with one another, then you can effectively go to which is the art portion of media arts. And so that's how people and different artists around the world have been able to show off the way they feel or the way that they want to portray their world. And that's something unique about media arts, that it takes you through so many different avenues to learn how to properly self-express, that eventually you're an artist. Everyone is capable of being an artist. If you're a TikToker, if you're an Instagrammer, you can be an artist in any medium.
That wraps up part 1 of our podcast, Media Arts Education. See you the next time on Arts Are Education.